Greetings, Exalted Ones. I'm Mark Ellis, Jedi Knight and friend of Captain Solo. You may think that I'm a fancy-dressed lad from Canada, but I consider myself from Tatooine. Why? Because I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and we're about to boldly go where that's not wrong franchise. Today's show is an epic contest set in a galaxy far, far away, where I'm going to pit Star Wars trilogies against each other. I know, you get nervous around competition, but the franchise is called Star Wars, and we're going to have a war for supremacy, but don't worry, no one's going to die. Unless you're a Bothan, am I right? It's the Star Wars Prequel trilogy versus the Star Wars sequel trilogy, episodes 1 through 3, directed by George Lucas, against episodes 7 through 9, directed by guys not named George Lucas.
Oh, I have a bad feeling about this.
I'm just presuming we all know the classic trilogy is the best, and that the best movie in that franchise is...
Empire Strikes Back.
I heard Return of the Jedi, and you are right. The original 3 films are untouchable. They're perfect in every way, and it's impossible to improve them unless your name is McClunky.
I love you.
I know.
Here's how the battle will be waged. Round 1, box office. Round 2, Tomatometer. Round 3, characters. And then we'll do a wild card round. Which trilogy have the most Ewoks? No, you don't. I'll figure out something else. I know, you're excited, I'm nervous, I'm taking us right into an asteroid field, so don't bother telling me the odds. Am I really about to compare Star Wars trilogies on the internet? Misa has a bad feeling about this. But, as an old dead wizard once told me, the Force will be with you. Always.
That's not how the Force works.
Round 1, box office. In breaking news, these movies tend to do very well at the box office. They're all-time blockbusters, and we were reminded just how big of a force they are in both 1999 and 2015 when we once again embarked on a new trilogy in the Star Wars galaxy. The prequels had so much hype built around them for years. Would they ever happen? Then, in 1997, the original trilogy was re-released in theaters with some new scenes, effects, and music.
And a few new surprises.
Say what you want about them now, but at the time, it was exciting because George was tinkering with new toys, like an old prize fighter back in the gym getting the rust off.
Is that George Lucas?
Not controlled through the eyes. I'm not George Lucas.
Thanksgiving 1998, we were treated to my favorite trailer of all time to this day, the teaser for Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. From there, anticipation was building to a fever pitch until audiences finally got to witness the film the following May, and wow, did they show up in droves. It was the very first film to cross the $100 million in an opening weekend domestic mark, and it went on to gross $1.2 billion worldwide. Following that up was Attack of the Clones, earning $900 million worldwide, and then Revenge of the Sith at $1 billion even. Talk about having the high ground.
It's over, Anakin!
And since we're talking about coin, it's worth noting that Star Wars merch had sold in excess of $4.5 billion from 1977 to 1999. I still have the Darth Maul Mountain Dew can at home to prove my allegiance to the cause. Do y'all want to know how much Star Wars merch has grossed all time? I'll tell you, at least $25 billion in sales. What does that even look like? That's enough money to drown Scrooge McDuck, and it's been boosting significantly thanks to the sequel trilogy. Disney bought the rights to Lucasfilm in 2012, and once again, the hype machine was primed in time for the December 2015 release of Episode 7, The Force Awakens. Our old favorites were coming back, and there was a new droid soccer ball to get jazzed about.
I'ma bend it.
No, please, no.
A new opening weekend standard was set to the tune of $247 million domestically, and the movie went on to gross $2.1 billion across the globe, which is still like $700 million short of Avatar. Look, I like that movie, but what was going on in 2009? Was Christmas that bad? Did we hate hanging out with our families that much that year? Wow. The Last Jedi was the 8th episode in the saga and grossed $1.5 billion worldwide. And this past holiday season, The Rise of Skywalker was released and has since crossed the $1 billion barrier. So if you're keeping score at home, the sequels are winning $4.4 billion to $3.7 billion. But here's why I'm giving the nod to the prequels. Because I had to wait in line for 2 days to get tickets. Yeah, the AMC 24 in Hampton, Virginia. I had to camp out overnight, and I even went there to go see The Mummy 3 weeks beforehand to scout the location. I was ready. And you had to be back at the turn of the millennium. You know how I got tickets to the sequel trilogy? There was no such magic device in 1999. You waited in line, you got into the theater at 10:30 p.m. for the midnight show. It was an all-day and all-night affair. Movie theaters weren't as sophisticated, they couldn't handle crowds as well as they do nowadays, and simply didn't have as many showtimes. So yeah, the sequel trilogy made more money than the prequels, but the prequels worked harder to earn our allowance. I'm also giving the prequels points for having the third film where the Sith get revenge. That made more money than the second film where the clones attack. In the new trilogy, each subsequent movie made less bucks overall. So the prequels get the point, and their midi-chlorian count is off the chart.
It's working! It's working!
Round 2, Tomatometer. Thus far, we've proven that Star Wars movies make lots of money and that I love denim. But how do these silly space fantasy westerns for kids fare on the Tomatometer? A look we shall take. The sequel trilogy opened strong with an impressive 93% for The Force Awakens, followed up by 91% for The Last Jedi. By comparison, The Phantom Menace currently sits at a rotten 53%, and Attack of the Clones is barely fresh at 65%. However, Revenge of the Sith helped the prequels out tremendously with a volcanic, rock-solid 80%. That gives the 3 prequel films a fresh average of 66%. Meanwhile, Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, only mustered 52% on the Tomatometer. That's the lowest Star Wars live-action film ever. That cost the sequel trilogy its A average, and now it'll never get into Princeton. I didn't go to Princeton, but I did attend Wake Forest University, known as the Harvard of the Appalachian Mountains, and thus I was able to decipher that the sequel average Tomatometer score is 79%. And then, like I said, the prequels are 66%, which is awesome because 66, as in the line, Commander Cody, execute Order 66.
Execute Order 66.
Can you imagine giving that order to a guy named Cody? Cody is the summer lifeguard at a pool, not the person responsible for initiating a religious genocide. Anyway, the sequel snagged the win in this round, and we're tied at 1 apiece.
And I'm in charge. I'm in charge now, Phasma. I'm in charge.
Bring it down. Bring it down.
Round 3, characters. Look, it's Star Wars, so nostalgia alone is gonna get most of us to buy a ticket. The music, the crawl text, the sound effects, we love it. But which trilogy gave us more new characters to add into the canon? Who are we gonna be nostalgic for when they make the next series of movies? Phantom Menace naturally had many of the classic trilogy characters, although they were much younger. If you're a youth, you gotta have someone to train you. So for Obi-Wan, that was Qui-Gon Jinn.
Be mindful of the living force, young Padawan.
If you're a Jedi, you need a civilization to protect, and that was led by Queen Amidala. On the dark side of the Force, we were introduced to Darth Maul, the sinister apprentice to Sheev. I know Palpatine isn't a new character, but it is cool to see him faking the good guy for a while. We also met the Jedi Council, which featured Mace Windu. We met Anakin's mom, Shmi. Really, that was her name? Shmi. This is my daughter, Shmi. Sebulba, a bunch of kids, and, okay, yes, fine, Jar Jar Binks. Hey, the kids loved Jar Jar, all right? We all have our thoughts. I have my opinion. The kids loved him. And Watto apparently wears a diaper. It's a mix of good and bad in that flick, but we are also introduced to the never not awesome dual-sided lightsaber. Look at how cool one side looks lit up, and you're like, oh, and then, are you kidding me? The other side? It's just so awesome. In terms of characters, The Force Awakens had an easier time and a tougher task at the same time. We got to see the big 3 of Han, Luke, and Leia again, although never together. It's easy. We're gonna love all of them. But the challenge was introducing us to a new cast they would actually care about. And it succeeded. The best big 3 since Duncan, Ginobili, and Parker was Finn, Rey, and Poe.
We're gonna do this.
Yeah?
Throughout the sequel trilogy, they had great chemistry. So great, in fact, that at some point we had theories about who was gonna hook up with who. If you guys wanna come over to my place and read my fan fiction, shoot me a DM.
Ooh.
The prequels would go on to give us characters like Jango Fett, who was cool, but I didn't really love how his kid fits into the whole world, and Count Dooku, played by the always imposing Christopher Lee. The sequels gave us Rose Tico, who represented hope in the galaxy, BB-8, who represented heart and toughness, and Maz Kanata, who is kind of like all the Golden Girls wrapped up in one tiny alien.
No.
Oh, and Kylo Ren. You're never gonna guess who his daddy is. He's under the influence of Snoke when we meet him, and he's trying to be a leader, but Hux ain't having it. So before I render my verdict in this round, let's take a quick look at these trilogies and where the characters ended up who we already knew. The prequels turned Anakin from a little kid who's very good at pod racing and building droids into Darth Vader, and they gave Obi-Wan a veteran's outlook on life with some giant regrets. The sequels? I'm gonna prepare you. They didn't end well for most of our old pals, but not before we got to see Harrison Ford embody Han Solo one more time. Some compelling introspection from Luke, and a hopeful matriculation of Force usage and leadership from Leia. So if I'm grading on characters, as much as I love the direction the sequels took, how can I vote for a trilogy that killed off my 3 favorite heroes of all time? Thank goodness they didn't kill Chewie. They teased us with it, which is not cool. But in fairness, they also gave us new people we genuinely care about. Plus Captain Phasma. And the prequels, although we got some new favorites, it's hard for me to look at Darth Vader and not think, no! No! It helps further the sequel's cause that the acting and chemistry in those films is just a lot better. Be honest, would you rather hang out with Finn, Rey, and Poe, or Padme and Anakin? Babu Frick puts it over the edge for me, and the sequels win round number 3. They're up 2-1. Wildcard round. Most iconic moments. Kids, life is all about moments. And since Star Wars is life, there's been some pretty memorable stuff. And while I have finally come around to the idea that maybe the prequels aren't the most well-made films ever, or well-acted,
Do it.
I will always defend the hill that each one has at least one moment that's worth loving. It usually involves the good old laser swords, Darth Maul getting double teamed at the end of Phantom Menace by Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, or remember when we saw Yoda and he turned on the lightsaber at the end of Attack of the Clones? That was awesome! And then the lightsaber fight we've been promised since we were little kids.
I will do what I must. You will try.
Obi-Wan, Anakin, that leads to him becoming Darth Vader at the climax of Revenge of the Sith, and that was just as epic as I'd always hoped. You just fast forward through the part where Padme dies of a broken heart? With J.J. Abrams or Rian Johnson at the helms for the sequels, you knew you were going to be getting some quality filmmaking, and moments like Reylo teaming up in Snoke's throne room in The Last Jedi certainly speak to that. Kylo and Rey battled again in The Rise of Skywalker with a second Death Star as the setting. It was pouring rain, but they ain't golfers. The more rain, the more cinematic those Force jumps become. But it does occur to me that the most memorable moments in the sequel trilogy are the ones that play on our nostalgia.
Chewie, we're home.
The Chewie we're home scene, seeing Luke's X-Wing fly into battle one last time, Leia embracing Han once more. The most original, notable moments to me in the sequels was Luke going out like a meditative boss. It was an Old West showdown done through the lens of a hot yoga studio, and I ate it up. But if the bulk of the sequel moments are reminding us why we fell for the classic trilogy in the first place, the prequels are full of instances that foreshadow what we already know is coming. Whether it's Boba Fett holding his old man's helmet, or Palpatine waxing to young Anakin about the tragedy of Darth Plagueis. Those films rewarded us folks who had watched the classic trilogy over and over again. The prequels also helped establish characters and timelines we'd see later in Clone Wars and the Rebels animated series. And the young sequels have already spawned a number of novels and comics that help fill in the gaps between the fall of the Empire and the rise of the First Order. But after all this evidence that supports both sides, I rely on my beer-infused gut to render the final verdict. It's the prequels. Yeah. From Darth Maul pacing back and forth, daring Obi-Wan to flinch, all the way to Darth Vader and Palpatine looking over the galaxy they're about to dominate, the prequels do it for me. They're not great films, but the moments of excitement they continue to provide more than make up for that. So we're tied at 2, and now my job gets tough. I gotta pick a winner between the movies I camped out overnight to see and the movies that I never thought could possibly exist. This is such an emotionally exhaustive decision. If I get through this, I should become a Jedi Knight.
Why, you stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder!
Anyway, before I make the call, let's admit that neither one of these endeavors panned out exactly like we had hoped. Yes, I said it, both trilogies have flaws. For the prequels, what if there had been someone to check George Lucas's vision, to govern which effects are gonna blow us away and which scenes might actually be better served on an actual location? Sometimes creativity flows out of limitations better than it does if the galaxy is at your fingertips. It's easy to Monday morning quarterback it now, but would any of us have had the gusto necessary to tell George, Anakin didn't build C-3PO? And for the sequels, what if there had been one cohesive filmmaking vision responsible for all 3 films? Would viewers feel like the sequel trilogy connected better? Would there have been such a rift between fans after the second one? Would we get Palpatine back at all? In the game of prequels versus sequels, I'll take the new ones. I find them more rewatchable, more emotional, and a little less cringy. You may feel different, and that's okay. To be honest, they're fan fiction, and the prequels came from the actual creator themselves. But as of now, this thing belongs to all of us.
Star Wars.
And so now it's your chance to voice your opinion. Vote for the trilogy that you love the most in the comments below, and if you feel like giving us reasons, have at it. It's been a rough road being a Star Wars fan recently. As spoiled as we are with all the new movies and novels and Baby Yoda, it's also frustrating when you constantly feel outnumbered against that unforgiving swamp known as the internet. So be respectful, be honest, and let's teach the rest of this wretched hive of scum and villainy how to enjoy the thing we all love. Thanks for watching. I'm Mark Ellis, and I hate sand. It's rough, it's coarse, gets everywhere.